Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Getting In, a college coach conversation. I feel like I've been on the show so much lately. It's very exciting. Last week I was a guest, or maybe that was 2 weeks ago. But anyway, I'm here today to host. If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a review at Apple Podcasts. It will help others to find us. So if you think this has been helpful to you, then help us help others. We have a really great show today. I think we always have a great show. I might be a little bit biased, but we have some great advice for families with students who are interested in a career in early childhood education. We are going to be talking about the Common App essay. But before we get to that, we are going to be talking about how to prepare your student financially as they head off to college, right? You're thinking, well, I bought the extra long sheets for their dorm bed and we've rented a mini fridge, but there is a huge piece of preparation that I think a lot of families don't always think about. And joining me today to discuss that is my colleague Jean Mahan, who also is a former financial aid officer at both Tufts and Quinsigamond Community College. Hi, Jean. How are you?
Hi, Beth. Great.
Good. So I was looking at kind of some ideas that you put together for this, and everyone I thought, oh, I've got to think about that. I've got to think about that
Yeah.
because next year I'm going to be in this position. Um, so why don't we start out with what I think is the most important, and that is the first big question, which is what kind of spending money are your student going to have,
Mm,
right? What's their allowance going to be, or even will they have an allowance?
Right. Great question. So some families choose to do a stipend or an allowance. They'll say you're getting X number of dollars a month or a week or for the term, budget it. Other students might have summer earnings and their parents have said, we're going to cover tuition and fees, but you're on the hook for your books and your pizza and whatever all else you need during the semester. So really, figuring out who's going to be responsible for those kinds of things. Students are also getting preloaded cards. So they'll have an ID card and it will swipe for the laundry and the bookstore and the coffee shops and that kind of thing. So you might want to have a discussion about who's loading that. Is that just part of the student's responsibility to use with their allowance or stipend or with their summer earnings? Because that will be important. And also to remind them how important that card is. If they lose it, it basically enables somebody else to take advantage of the bookstore, the dining hall, and who knows what all else.
Right.
So yeah, keep that card close to your vest.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even if students have experience with an ATM card, a debit card, this kind of thing where the money's already preloaded is a
Mm,
completely different thing, right? Altogether. So
sure. And a lot of
excellent
times they're
advice.
hooked to keys.
Hmm.
And kids lose keys all the time. We all lose keys all the time or leave them someplace. And
Yes.
it's so easy to be in the library, leave your keys on the edge of the desk, and somebody walks by and just takes them. So yeah, be
Yeah.
really careful with those.
Great advice. And then I think the next one also super important, which is, you know, what's the budget going to be, right? So if you are going to give your child money, how much money can they expect from you, or and things like that. So talk to us about how you think about a budget for your student,
Sure. So most of their big costs are taken care of. Their food is taken care of. Their,
at least
basic
in year one,
clothing.
right?
Yes, their clothing is taken care of for the most part. Whoever is paying for books and those kinds of things. So kind of deciding, all right, this is the amount of money that either we're giving you or you're using. You've earned $2,000 over the summer. You've got 16 weeks to take care of. How are you going to budget that? And to help them to set that up so that they know, okay, this week I have X number of dollars. I paid for my books and now I have $40 that I can spend. If I don't spend it all, I can roll it to the next week, or I don't have to spend it. It's not a requirement. But just helping them to understand that $2,000 needs to last 4 months. And
Yes,
if they blow through it too fast, what happens then? Are mom and dad coming to the rescue with an open purse?
right.
So yeah, really important to have that discussion. And Beth, you're in a unique position where you have a whole year to get your
Yes.
son up and going. So, but for parents who haven't really thought about this, we've got the summer here and it's a great time to be working on those skills.
Yeah, not only, well, I have a year to plan for it, I also have my own cautionary tale, which is that I had earned $2,000 to go abroad for the year to Paris and managed to spend all of it in the first 4 months. And then I left Paris and came back early because, as you can only do
Ran out
when
of
you're
money.
when you're 20 years old and you're missing out on what's going on campus. And yes, you're in Paris. God, I don't know if I ever been that young and dumb. I don't know. However, then I had to figure out quickly how was I going to earn considerably
Mhm.
more than I would normally earn with a campus job to pay for things like my rent, which should have been covered by that money. So,
Yeah.
budget, I know from experience, is very important, and I did not have a blank check from my parents to make up for my own budget
Right.
shortfalls.
And it's really important for kids to know that if you run out, you're going to have to find a job or do something to get some money because we won't bail you out. So
Right.
if you are going to bail, that's fine too, but just make sure everybody's on the same page and knows what the ramifications are of blowing through money too quickly.
Exactly, exactly. Really good advice. Right now, my son has a debit card that's tied to my bank account. He has sort of a junior card that
Mhm.
when he turns 18, he can have his own account. But what do you think about bank accounts for students? And I know when I went off to college, we opened an account at
Mm.
the local bank, but curious if students still do that.
Right. So I am a huge fan of bank accounts for kids, no matter what the age is, because I think it's a great way to teach them about saving and budgeting and that kind of thing. Right now, I don't think that most students actually need to set up an account near school because as long as they're aware of the network that their ATM is associated with, then it should be fine. So, they have to understand that if you're not taking out of the right network, you could be incurring a fee of $5 every time you withdraw money.
Yes.
That's huge. You take 20 out and you're paying five later on down the road. So it's really important for them to understand that. So I think it's less important to have a bank account near school as long as they can access the funds pretty easily. And it's really up to families to decide how much supervision they want of that account.
Yep.
If it's the student's account and you're sort of making that their responsibility, then that's their responsibility. If they're dipping into your account, obviously you want to know exactly what's going on.
Right.
So, yeah. And some families won't be able to open an account for a student without a parent if they're under 18. So when my son went off to college, he was only 17,
Mm.
and I had to be on the account in order for him to open it. But once they're 18, they can open it themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a big fan of students having their own accounts for all the reasons you mentioned. And I also feel like, especially if they have a job and they're earning money,
Mm,
that should be going into account that they control. Like you, my son right now is only 17, so he can't have his own account. But as soon as he turns 18, my plan is to shift that into an adult account. And not that I will maybe give up complete insight into it, but he's got to live in the world without me. And how
mhm,
will I launch him into that world if he can't manage his own money?
right.
So I'll put in a plug for that.
It will only take one time though, because my son came home one time for
Hmm.
spring break. And I asked him before he left, do you need any money? Oh, no, I'm fine. And then I get a call from DC because he had a layover.
Hmm.
I can't access any of my money because for some reason I can't get into my savings account, which is where my money is. And
Ah,
I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. You're in DC and I can't get you any money. So he
right,
figured it out. He got on the plane, he got back to school, he found somebody to pick him up at the airport. So it all worked out because he didn't even have subway money.
right.
It never happened again. It happened once, lesson learned.
Yeah, so nowadays the easy thing is you could bail them out because I control it all from my phone, right? So if he's like, "Oh, I don't have any money," I can transfer it in. So maybe you will learn. Might take a little longer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little trickier. All right, here's a big one. I have my own cautionary tale about this as well because apparently I'm terrible with money, or I was anyway. Credit cards. What do you think, kids and credit cards as they go off to college?
Okay. So I'll tell you about my tale. So with my oldest child, I said, you absolutely do not need a credit card. You've got a debit card. That's all you need. So he
Hmm.
graduated from college and he got a job and he needed to buy a car. And guess what? He had no credit history.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a good move on my part. But his
Hmm.
sister was 4 years younger and she was getting ready to go to college. So we allowed her to get a credit card and we put a limit on it. So I
Mm.
think the limit was $350 or something. She was going to school close to home, so it wasn't like she needed a plane ticket.
Right.
And so she knew that she should only charge what she could afford to pay in 1 month. Now, some families choose to make their child an authorized user on their account, and that's fine too, because then you can actually see what's going on.
Hmm.
Uh, the student will establish a credit history. It just will be a lot slower than if they have their own card. But if you want them to have their own card, it's really important to educate them as to what this card means. It's basically a loan.
Right.
And if you go out and you spend $500 on a really fabulous pair of boots or something like that, and you can't make that payment this month, then that's going to be accruing interest. And so your bill is gradually going to get larger and larger and maybe really difficult to repay. And my experience is sometimes kids, when they don't want to deal with something, they just like don't deal with it.
Put it in a
And
drawer and ignore it.
exactly.
Yes.
Delete that email from the credit card company.
Right.
And so by then the damage is done and they need to understand the long-term ramifications. So if you're not making those payments, it's hurting your future credit.
Right.
When you go to get a car loan later or get another credit card, you just won't have the good credit to get those lower interest rates. So really educating them.
Right, exactly. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword. It's not a bad idea to have the card because you can establish credit history,
Mhm.
but if you misuse the card, you're destroying the credit history
Right.
that you're establishing.
Exactly. Yep.
Not great. Not
Not
great.
great at all. And it's
Yes.
great that credit card companies can't canvass on campus anymore. I mean,
Hmm.
prior to like the last recession, they could, and kids would get these cards and they'd be charging all kinds of stuff on it and then not paying the bills. So got them into a lot of trouble. So at least now they're not able to do that. So it gives families more of an opportunity to kind of be involved in that process and do
Right.
some education first,
What
hopefully.
you mentioned something to me about, your shopping. Let's say you're at, I was going to say the Gap, but that feels so old school now. You're at Nordstrom and you're making your purchase, and the person informs you that, hey, if you applied for, or TJ Maxx, this happened to me
Yeah.
just the other day. Hey, if you apply for our credit card, you could get 20% off or 10% off of this entire purchase you're making today. And
Hmm.
I have learned over time that's never a good idea. And so it's an easy thing to turn down. Any, advice on, sort of educating your college students on this
Yes.
before it happens?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Just say no, as they
Yeah.
say, because, if you've got like one of the major credit cards, you can use that anywhere. You can use it at restaurants and stores. So you don't need all those individual credit cards. Um, every time you're opening a new credit card, it's kind of hurting your credit score. You have more opportunities to misuse credit, to lose that card.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you don't need it. And even though 10% or 20% sounds pretty fabulous, when you think about it, it's $10 off 100, just eat the $10 and keep your credit under control. So yeah.
Right. And if you can't pay off that balance, usually the interest rates are really high. And so you will more than spend that money and then some. So
Right.
agreed,
And
not worth
using,
it.
yeah, and using a calculator just to show students, like if you buy this item for $100 and you're only paying the minimum payment of $10 a month,
Hmm.
this is how long it's going to take you to pay that card off. And this is what that item will cost. Is it worth it?
Right. All right. We have two more before we go to break. And the next one is educating your kids about keeping their personal information safe.
Mhm.
Really important.
So when I had a landline and, I was constantly getting calls from the IRS saying that they were sending someone to my house to arrest me for non-payment of taxes and, all these kinds of things. They were scams. So
Yes.
it's important to tell your kids, the bank is not going to call you and ask you for your account number.
Right.
The credit card company is not going to call you and ask you for your account number. Don't give any information. If you get an email and it says, click on this link to your credit card statement, if you're not sure, call the credit card company and say, did you send this email to me?
Right.
Did you send me this alert? And remind them the IRS, the banks, they're not going to be calling asking for personal identifying information, that these are scams, that they can be used to really hurt them. Stealing their identity is no laughing matter. It takes a long time to clear that
Right.
up.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, really important.
Yes. Last thing, and I always joke that wherever my son ends up going to college, they're going to lose money on him. But you had some really good advice around meal plans. So
Yeah.
talk to us about that really quickly.
Sure. And I thought my son would make me, lose money, but it turned out that he wasn't eating anywhere near the number of meals for a variety of reasons. But, most meal plans are, especially for freshmen, might cover 20 meals a week, 19 to 20 meals a week.
Mhm.
Some of them are 15. But those ID cards that we talked about, they can swipe those at restaurants on campus, coffee shops, even around campus. Some of those shops will also accept the cards. And so, if you don't use your meal plan, I liken it to going into a restaurant, paying for the meal, turning around and walking out and leaving it on the table uneaten. So
Yeah.
if you've got all these meals and you haven't used them and you don't get credit for them, then you've basically wasted your money. So make sure that your student, if they don't need the 20 meal plan, 15 will probably do it. Tons of college students have tons of food in their rooms. No one's going hungry on a college campus.
Exactly.
So
Jean, thank you so much for joining today.
you're
I really
welcome. It was
appreciate
fun
it.
to talk to you today.
You too. All right, we're going to take a really quick break and then we come back. We're going to have some information about an early childhood education degree program that you can do for basically free. So if that's something that you're interested in, then don't go away.